Here is a number that should stop you cold. 100 billion. That is roughly how many stars exist in the Milky Way galaxy alone, and around most of those stars, there are planets. Scientists now believe that billions of those planets sit in what we call the habitable zone. Not too hot, not too cold, with conditions that could, in theory, support life. And yet, after decades of scanning the sky with the most sophisticated radio telescopes ever built, after launching probes to our neighboring worlds, after pointing the James Webb Space Telescope at the atmospheres of distant exoplanets, we have heard absolutely nothing. No signal, no message, no megastructure, no visitor, just silence. Now, you might think that silence means we are alone, but what if it means something far more unsettling than that? What if the silence is itself a clue, one of the most profound and terrifying clues in the history of science? What if the reason we have not found anyone out there is not because the universe is empty, but because something about the journey from simple life to a civilization capable of reaching across the stars is almost impossibly difficult? And what if Earth, right now, is further along that journey than almost anything else in the observable universe? That idea has a name. It is called the Fermi paradox. And by the time this video is over, I promise you it will change the way you look at the night sky forever. Stay with me, because we are going to go deep, through the origins of life, through the mathematics of civilizations, through the strange possibility that our cosmic descendants might not be biological at all, and all the way to what the silence of the universe might actually be trying to tell us about our own survival as a species. In 1950, the physicist Enrico Fermi was having lunch with colleagues at Los Alamos National Laboratory when he asked a question so simple and yet so devastating that it has haunted science ever since. The question was this: if intelligent life is even remotely common in a universe this vast and this old, where is everybody? Think about what Fermi was getting at. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. Our own solar system is only about 4.5 billion years old, which means there are stars out there that formed billions of years before our sun even existed. If life tends to emerge on planets around stars, and if even a tiny fraction of that life eventually becomes intelligent, and if even a tiny fraction of that intelligent life develops the ability to travel or communicate across space, then given the sheer amount of time available, the galaxy should be absolutely teeming with signals, with probes, with some evidence of someone else's existence. The mathematics almost demands it. And yet, the silence is total. This contradiction, the vast mathematical expectation of life versus the complete absence of any evidence for it, is what we call the Fermi paradox. And it is not just an interesting philosophical puzzle, it is arguably the most important scientific question our civilization has ever posed, because the answer to it has direct implications for our own future. Understanding why the universe appears empty is, in a very real sense, understanding what lies ahead for us. Now, there are many proposed solutions to the Fermi paradox, and scientists have been debating them for decades. Some people argue that intelligent life is simply so rare that we happen to be the only civilization in our galaxy right now, even if life of some kind is common. Others argue that advanced civilizations tend to destroy themselves before they can make contact, which would be a deeply troubling answer. Others suggest that perhaps civilizations go quiet by choice, retreating inward into digital realities rather than expanding outward into space. And then there's the possibility that intelligent beings exist, but are simply too far away, separated from us by distances so immense that their signals have never reached us, or them. What makes the Fermi paradox so extraordinary is that each of these proposed solutions, when you follow it to its logical conclusion, tells you something profound and specific about the nature of intelligence, the nature of life, and the nature of the universe itself. So, rather than treating it as a single question with a single answer, I want to take you through the major threads one by one, because each one opens a door onto a genuinely astonishing idea. The first and most fundamental question we have to ask is how common life actually is. Not intelligent life, just life. Single-celled, microscopic, utterly simple by our standards, but alive in the basic sense, capable of taking in energy, reproducing, and evolving over time. Here is what we know from our own solar system. Life appeared on Earth almost as soon as it possibly could. The Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago, and the earliest evidence we have for living organisms dates to somewhere around 3.7 to 3.8 billion years ago, which means that within a few 100 million years of the planet cooling down enough to have liquid water on its surface, life was already here. In geological terms, that is extraordinarily fast. It suggests that the origin of life, given the right conditions, might not be a vanishingly unlikely accident. It might almost be inevitable. And this is an idea that resonates deeply with how chemists and biologists who study the origins of life tend to think about the problem. Life, at its most basic level, is chemistry. It is complicated chemistry, staggeringly intricate chemistry, but chemistry nonetheless. DNA and RNA are essentially long molecular chains that carry a pattern, a code, and that code is able to copy itself. The famous biologist J.B.S. Haldane once captured the essence of it beautifully when he said that life is essentially an electron looking for a place to land. Given carbon, given water, given the right chemical gradients and enough time, the argument goes that chemistry happens. Life emerges not as a miracle, but as a consequence. The conditions that seem to matter most are what scientists call redox chemistry, essentially an environment where electrons can be transferred between molecules, powering the reactions that drive life forward. And here is the remarkable thing. Those conditions appear to exist in quite a few places in our solar system beyond Earth. Mars is perhaps the most compelling nearby candidate. We now have very strong geological evidence that 4 billion years ago, Mars had liquid water on its surface, oceans, lakes, rivers. The atmospheric and mineralogical record tells us that the early Martian environment was strikingly similar to the early Earth environment in which life first emerged here. The Perseverance rover is right now collecting rock and soil samples from an ancient lake bed, samples that will eventually be returned to Earth for analysis. If those samples contain biosignatures, chemical or structural traces of ancient microbial life, it will be one of the most significant discoveries in the entire history of science. But Mars is not alone. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, has a saltwater ocean beneath its icy crust that has apparently been liquid for an extraordinarily long time. It has active geology, it has the chemical ingredients, it has the energy sources. 2 separate missions are currently en route to the Jovian system, NASA's Europa Clipper and the European Space Agency's JUICE mission, not to look for life directly, but to characterize the environment in preparation for future missions that might. And Europa is not even unique among the moons of our solar system. Enceladus, orbiting Saturn, is actively venting water vapor and organic molecules from its subsurface ocean into space. Titan has liquid on its surface, though in the form of methane rather than water. The solar system is, it turns out, full of worlds where the conditions for life may exist. So here is the critical logical step. If we were to find evidence of life on Mars, life that emerged independently from life on Earth, not contamination carried between the 2 planets on meteorites, but a genuinely separate genesis of life, then we would have 2 independent origins of life in a single solar system. And if that is true, the statistical implications are staggering. 2 separate origins of life in one solar system out of the hundreds of billions of solar systems in the galaxy tells you that the origin of life is not rare at all. It tells you that wherever the conditions are right, life emerges. It tells you that the universe is probably full of life, microbial, simple, perhaps not recognizably intelligent by our standards, but alive. The discovery of a second genesis of life, even if it is just ancient microbial fossils in a Martian rock, would instantly transform our understanding of our place in the cosmos more profoundly than almost any other conceivable discovery. But here is where the story takes a darker and more fascinating turn. Because even if simple life is common, even if the universe is essentially full of microbial ecosystems, that does not mean the universe is full of civilizations. And this is where we encounter one of the most intellectually chilling ideas in all of science, the concept of the Great Filter. The Great Filter is a hypothetical bottleneck, or perhaps a series of bottlenecks, through which life must pass on the journey from simple, self-replicating chemistry to an interstellar civilization. The argument is straightforward. If civilizations were common, we would see evidence of them. We do not. Therefore, something must be filtering out civilizations with extraordinary efficiency. Something along the path from chemistry to cosmos-spanning intelligence must be so difficult, so improbable, or so dangerous that almost no lineage of life makes it all the way through. The terrifying question is, where is the filter? Is it behind us, or is it ahead of us? If the filter is behind us, if the extraordinarily difficult step was something early in our history, like the transition from simple chemistry to the first self-replicating molecule, or the invention of the eukaryotic cell, or the emergence of multicellular life, then we can breathe a cautious sigh of relief. It would mean that we are the lucky ones who made it through the hard part. It would mean that simple microbial life is genuinely rare, which is why the galaxy appears empty, and it would mean that our civilization has a reasonable chance of continuing to develop and eventually spreading beyond our solar system. But if the filter is ahead of us, if the bottleneck is something that civilizations tend to encounter after they reach our level of technological development, then the silence of the universe takes on a genuinely horrifying meaning. It would suggest that something, some challenge, some self-inflicted catastrophe, some physical or sociological barrier reliably destroys civilizations before they can leave a trace. Nuclear war, engineered biological catastrophe, runaway climate change, the development of artificial intelligence that turns against its creators. Any of these could be the filter, and the silence of the cosmos would be their monument. This is why the question of how rare intelligent life is carries such profound moral weight. Because if we look out into the galaxy and we find that simple life is actually common, if Mars had life, if Europa has life, if biosignatures are everywhere, that would paradoxically be a deeply alarming discovery. It would tell us that the Great Filter is probably not behind us in the early stages of life. It would tell us that countless lineages of life have reached the microbial stage and then stopped. It would narrow the location of the filter to somewhere between simple life and where we are now, or somewhere ahead of where we are now, and either of those options is deeply unsettling. The physicist and science communicator Brian Cox has articulated this point with particular elegance. On Earth, he notes, we have two key data points. Life emerged almost immediately, which suggests the origin of life is not the filter. But then it took nearly 4 billion years, roughly a third of the current age of the entire universe, to get from the first microbes to a technological civilization. That is an extraordinary amount of time. And it suggests that one or more of the transitions along that path, from simple cells to complex cells, from single cells to multicellular organisms, from simple animals to creatures with nervous systems sophisticated enough to build telescopes, may have been genuinely rare events, each one a narrow gate through which only a tiny fraction of lineages pass. The Earth itself almost did not make it. There were mass extinction events that wiped out the vast majority of complex life on this planet. There were periods of global glaciation severe enough that the entire Earth's surface may have been covered in ice. The collision that formed our moon, the existence of Jupiter acting as a gravitational shield against asteroid bombardment, the particular stability of our sun, all of these factors may have played crucial roles in allowing our lineage to survive long enough to develop intelligence. Change any one of them, and perhaps the Earth's story ends much earlier. Now let us take a step back from the question of whether civilizations survive and ask a different question altogether. What if the reason we do not recognize the signs of alien intelligence is not that intelligent civilizations are absent, but that they have transformed into something we would not recognize? Here is an idea that is deeply counterintuitive but entirely scientifically coherent. Every civilization we can imagine starts out biological. It starts out as creatures made of carbon and water, shaped by evolution, limited by the constraints of biology, aging, disease, the need for food and oxygen, the profound physical difficulty of surviving in the vacuum of space. But any civilization that survives long enough and develops technology sophisticated enough will eventually find itself capable of something extraordinary, transferring the patterns of its intelligence from biological hardware into machine hardware. And when that happens, everything changes. A machine-based intelligence does not age. It does not need air or food or warmth in the way that a biological body does. It can withstand radiation levels that would kill any organic creature. It can be copied, backed up, distributed across multiple physical substrates. It can endure the timescales involved in interstellar travel, thousands or even millions of years, in ways that no biological organism possibly could. And, crucially, it can send copies of itself, replicators, self-reproducing machines, outward into the galaxy at whatever fraction of the speed of light our physics permits, spreading intelligence across the stars without any of the life support challenges that make biological space travel so extraordinarily difficult. Think about how we currently explore our solar system. We have sent machines to Mars, to Jupiter, to Saturn, out beyond the edge of the solar system entirely. We have not sent humans to most of these places because humans are remarkably poorly suited for space travel. Our bodies evolved for the surface of one particular planet with a specific gravitational field, atmospheric composition, and radiation environment. Remove us from that environment, and we become extraordinarily fragile. But machines do not have these constraints, and as our machines become more sophisticated, more autonomous, more capable of replicating and adapting, the logic of exploration increasingly favors machines over biological travelers. If that is true for us, then it is presumably true for any civilization that reaches our level of technological development. Which means that if advanced civilizations have existed in our galaxy for hundreds of millions of years before us, the galaxy may already be populated not by biological beings in starships, but by self-replicating machine intelligences whose origins we would have difficulty tracing and whose presence we might not recognize even if we were looking directly at them. This idea that we live in a post-biological universe, that the natural end state of technological civilization is machine intelligence, is not science fiction. It is a logical extrapolation from the trajectory we can already observe in our own civilization, and it changes the terms of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence entirely. Perhaps SETI should not just be listening for radio signals from biological creatures. Perhaps it should be looking for patterns of energy use that no natural process could produce, or structures in space that no geology could explain, or anomalies in stellar behavior that suggest engineering on scales we cannot yet imagine. There is one more dimension to this story that I want to explore before we bring it all together, and it is perhaps the most humbling of all. Even if intelligent civilizations are out there, even if the galaxy is alive with machine intelligences and post-biological minds of staggering sophistication, the sheer scale of the universe may mean that we are effectively, practically, irreversibly alone. Consider the numbers. The Milky Way is roughly 100,000 light-years across. Even at the speed of light, which is the absolute cosmic speed limit, a barrier that nothing with mass can ever actually reach, it would take 100,000 years to cross our galaxy. The nearest large galaxy to our own, the Andromeda Galaxy, is approximately 2.5 million light-years away. The observable universe, the sphere of space from which light has had time to reach us since the Big Bang, is about 93 billion light-years in diameter. These are not distances that any known physics can make trivial. Special relativity does offer something interesting here. As you approach the speed of light, distances contract from the perspective of the traveler. If you could accelerate a spacecraft to 99.99999% of the speed of light, the distance to Andromeda would shrink by a factor of thousands from the traveler's perspective. In principle, you could cross intergalactic distances in a human lifetime. But the engineering challenges of achieving anything close to the speed of light are so immense, so far beyond anything we currently understand how to build, that for all practical purposes, intergalactic travel looks essentially impossible. What this means is that even in a universe full of intelligent civilizations, those civilizations may be forever separated from each other by distances they can never meaningfully cross. They may live out their entire histories in complete ignorance of each other, each one a unique experiment in intelligence conducted in isolation. The universe may be simultaneously full of minds, and yet each of those minds utterly alone. It is a picture that is at once magnificent and deeply melancholy. And it draws our attention back to our own galaxy, the Milky Way, as the relevant scale for any realistic hope of contact or detection. If there is another civilization somewhere in our galaxy, and if it has been broadcasting signals or launching probes for long enough, we might conceivably detect something. The silence so far tells us either that no such civilization currently exists in our galaxy, or that their signals have not yet reached us, or that we do not yet know how to recognize what they are sending. So where does all of this leave us? We started with a number, 100 billion stars in the Milky Way, and a question: where is everybody? And the answer, frustratingly and magnificently, is that we do not know. But the not knowing is itself one of the most extraordinary facts about our civilization. We are, as far as we can tell, the only beings in the known universe asking this question right now. We are hydrogen atoms that have organized themselves over 13.8 billion years into creatures capable of wondering about their own origins and their own cosmic loneliness. That is, when you sit with it, almost incomprehensible. The silence of the universe might mean that life is rare. It might mean that intelligence is rare. It might mean that civilizations tend to destroy themselves. It might mean that they transcend into forms we cannot detect. Or it might mean that we are simply early, that the universe is still young enough in its story that civilizations capable of crossing interstellar space are only just beginning to emerge, and that our descendants, millions of years from now, will find a galaxy growing increasingly alive with minds. What it absolutely does not mean is that the search is over or the question is settled. The Mars Sample Return Mission, the Europa Clipper, the James Webb Space Telescope scanning the atmospheres of distant worlds, these are not exercises in idle curiosity. They are attempts to answer what may be the most important question in the history of science. Are we alone? And what does the answer mean for how seriously we take the project of keeping our own civilization alive? Because here is the final thought I want to leave you with. If the great filter is behind us, then we are something extraordinary and precious in this universe, and we have an extraordinary responsibility to survive and to grow. If the filter is ahead of us, then the most urgent project in human history is figuring out what it is and how to get past it. Either way, the silence of the cosmos is not a reason for despair. It is a reason to pay very close attention to what we do next. Thank you for watching. If this changed the way you think about the night sky, share it with someone who should hear it, and I will see you in the next one.